You really think you can just dig through things that aren't yours and expect no consequences? That envelope was meant to stay buried. Some things are better left alone for the good of the family. Your aunt warned me you might do something like this. She said you've been acting strange lately. If you insist on making a scene about old letters, then perhaps you should think about whether you still have a place at our table. I won't have you destroying everything we've worked so hard to maintain. Not now, not ever. Hi, my name is Emily Harper. I am 34 years old. I was standing in my kitchen in Asheville, North Carolina, the phone pressed so hard against my ear that my fingers ached. The call had come out of nowhere on a quiet Saturday morning while I was still in my work from home, sweatpants, coffee cooling on the counter. My mother's voice had that familiar edge, the one she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while cutting you off at the knees. She didn't ask what I had found. She didn't ask how I felt. She went straight for the accusation like she had been rehearsing it. I had found the envelope 7 days earlier in the bottom drawer of the old desk I had brought with me when I moved out of my childhood home. It had been shoved behind a stack of faded birthday cards and old report cards, the kind of place you only look when you're forcing yourself to clear out the past. The handwriting on the front was my father's, neat and careful, even in his later years. I had stared at it for a long time before opening it, half expecting nothing important. What I found instead were pages torn from a journal dated almost 15 years ago, written in the same careful hand. My father had documented in quiet, exhausted detail how my mother had gradually pushed me to the edges of every family event, every holiday, every trip to the cabin in the Smoky Mountains. He wrote that she did it to keep the image of the perfect Harper family intact, the one where everyone got along and no one asked uncomfortable questions. He wrote that my Aunt Linda had helped make it happen, smoothing things over, making excuses, reinforcing the story that I was the one who was too busy or too sensitive to attend. I had taken photos of the pages that same night and sent them to my best friend Jessica Morales. She had called me immediately voice tight and told me I needed to be careful. She said my mother would not take it well. I had planned to sit with it for a while, maybe talk to the therapist Jessica had recommended, Dr. Elena Vargas. I had not planned on my mother finding out so fast. But my Aunt Linda had always been my mother's shadow and her enforcer. The two of them moved through family matters like they shared one mind. If my mother had told her about the envelope, or if my aunt had somehow seen the photos on my phone when I was at her house the week before helping with some old boxes, then the warning had gone out immediately. My mother's call proved it. She already knew. She had already decided I was the threat. I tried to keep my voice steady on the phone. I told her the pages were from my father, that they were his words, not something I had made up. She cut me off before I could finish the sentence. The sarcasm was sharp and practiced. She said my father had been struggling at the end and had seen things that weren't there. She said the family had always included me when it made sense. She said I was turning a few old pages into a crisis because I had too much time on my hands now that work was busy. Every sentence landed like she had been waiting years to say it out loud. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were shaking. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the envelope and the photos on my phone. The words on the journal pages hadn't changed, but they felt heavier now that my mother had confirmed them in real time. She hadn't denied the pattern. She had just attacked me for noticing it. The next morning I called Jessica. She listened while I paced my small living room, recounting every line of the call. She didn't tell me to calm down. She asked what I was going to do. I didn't have an answer. I only knew that pretending the exclusions had been accidental was no longer possible. The annual family gathering at the cabin was coming up in 6 weeks. I had already been told through my aunt that the dates might not work for me this year. The journal pages and the phone call made it clear why. I made an appointment with Dr. Elena Vargas for the following Tuesday. In the waiting room, I kept checking my phone, half expecting another call from my mother or a text from my Aunt Linda explaining that I had misunderstood everything. Neither came. The silence felt deliberate, like they were giving me enough rope to hang myself with before the next family event. Dr. Vargas was calm and direct. She read the journal pages without comment, then asked me what I wanted the truth to change. I told her I didn't know yet. I only knew that the version of the family my mother had spent decades protecting had required me to stay small and quiet. The pages proved it had been deliberate. She asked if I was prepared for what might happen if I pushed back. I said I wasn't. She said that was honest and that honesty was a place to start. 2 days later, my cousin Mark Thompson texted me. Mark was my Aunt Linda's oldest son, the one who had always been treated like the golden grandchild. His message was careful. He said his mother had mentioned I was going through something with some old family papers and that everyone just wanted me to be okay. He added almost as an afterthought that he hoped I would still make it to the cabin gathering. The wording felt copied from someone else's script. I thanked him and didn't reply further. I wondered how many other relatives had already been told the same story. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the phone call and the journal pages. Around midnight, I opened the security app for the cabin. My mother had installed the cameras 3 years earlier after a break-in scare at a neighbouring property. I still had access from when I used to check on the place during the off-season. I hadn't looked at the footage in months. Something made me scroll back to the day after I found the envelope. The clip was from late afternoon. My mother and my Aunt Linda were sitting on the back deck of the cabin, coffee mugs in hand, the mountains behind them. The audio was clear. My mother was saying she had already handled me. My aunt laughed, that light dismissive sound she used when she wanted to sound supportive. She said I had always been the one who made things difficult, the one who couldn't just enjoy the family without turning everything into a problem. My mother agreed. She said some people didn't fit the story anymore and that it was kinder to let them step back on their own. They talked about the upcoming gathering like it was already decided I wouldn't be there. My aunt said she would make sure the rest of the family understood it was for the best. I watched the clip 4 times. Each time the casual cruelty settled deeper. They weren't angry. They weren't defending themselves. They were simply removing me from the equation to keep the picture clean. The family myth was more important than any actual person in it. I saved the clip and sent it to Jessica with no message. She called me at 1:17 a.m. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the anger underneath. She said I had proof now. Real current proof. She asked what I was going to do with it. I told her I didn't know yet, but I couldn't unsee it. She said she would be there no matter what I decided. I thanked her and hung up before I started crying. The next morning I got another call from my mother. Her tone was lighter, almost pleasant. She said she had been thinking about our conversation and thought it would be good if we met in person at the cabin, just the 2 of us, to clear the air before the gathering. She said it would be better to handle things privately. I knew what she meant. She wanted me on her territory where she could control the story again. I told her I would think about it and hung up. I spent the rest of the day at work distracted, staring at my computer screen without seeing it. My co-worker David Kim asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. He didn't push. I was grateful. I didn't have the energy to explain that my mother and aunt had just casually erased me from the family on camera. That evening, I sat on my couch with the journal pages and the saved footage on my phone. The truth was ugly and quiet. My mother had spent years shaping a version of our family where I was the difficult one who didn't belong. My aunt had helped her do it. The rest of the family had accepted it because it was easier than questioning the woman who held everything together. I had accepted it too for a long time because fighting it meant admitting how alone I already was. I decided I would go to the cabin. Not for the gathering, not to be managed. I would go to show my mother the footage and the journal pages and tell her I was done playing my assigned role. I didn't know what would happen after that. I only knew I couldn't keep carrying the myth anymore. Jessica met me for coffee the next morning before I left. She made me promise to call her as soon as I was back on the road. She said she was proud of me for not letting it slide. I didn't feel proud. I felt sick and tired and strangely clear. The drive to the cabin took 3 hours. I kept the radio off and the windows cracked, letting the cold mountain air in. The envelope was in my bag. The footage was on my phone. I had no plan beyond showing up and refusing to disappear again. When I pulled into the gravel drive, my mother's car was already there. She stepped out onto the porch before I had turned off the engine. She was wearing the same calm expression she always wore when she wanted to appear reasonable. I got out of the car and walked toward her. The air was cold and sharp. Neither of us spoke at first. She looked at the bag in my hand, then at my face. I had the footage ready on my phone. I had the journal pages printed out. I had practiced what I was going to say in the car. None of it felt like enough. My mother opened the door and gestured for me to come inside. I followed her into the kitchen. The same table where we had eaten countless family meals, the same view of the mountains that had always made everything feel smaller and more manageable. She sat down. I stayed standing. I placed the printed pages and my phone on the table between us. She didn't reach for either. She just waited, that same patient, slightly pitying look on her face. I told her I had found the envelope. I told her I had watched the security footage. I told her I was done being edited out of the family story she had spent decades protecting. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologise. She simply said that I had always been too sensitive for my own good and that some things were better left in the past. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. That was when I felt something inside me finally give way, not anger, not even sadness. Just a deep, exhausted clarity that this was never going to change. The myth mattered more than I did. I picked up my phone and my bag. I told her I wouldn't be at the gathering. I told her I wouldn't be at any future gatherings. I told her that if the family required me to stay silent and invisible to keep the picture perfect, then I was choosing to step out of the frame. She didn't argue. She didn't ask me to stay. She just nodded once like she had been expecting this outcome all along. I drove back down the mountain as the lights started to fade. The road curved sharply in places and I had to focus on the turns to keep from crying. By the time I reached the highway, the tears had started anyway. They weren't loud. They were steady, the kind that come when you finally stop hoping someone will choose you over the story they've told about you. I called Jessica from a rest stop an hour later. My voice was hoarse. I told her what had happened. She didn't say I told you so. She just said she was sorry it had gone that way and that she was proud of me for saying it out loud. I thanked her and promised to call when I got home. Then I sat in the car for a long time watching other people's headlights pass on the highway, feeling the weight of what I had just done settle into my chest. The boundary was set. The myth would continue without me. My mother and my aunt would tell the rest of the family whatever version made them look reasonable. I would become the difficult one who walked away, and I would have to learn how to live with the truth I had chosen over the comfort of being included in a lie. I made it back to Asheville just after midnight. The apartment felt emptier than usual when I unlocked the door and dropped my bag on the floor. Jessica had texted me twice during the drive checking in. I replied with a short, "I'm home," and turned my phone face down on the kitchen counter. I didn't want to talk anymore that night. The confrontation kept replaying in my head on a loop, my mother's calm dismissal mixing with the audio from the security footage. The next morning I went to work like nothing had happened. I sat through meetings about project timelines and client feedback, nodding at the right moments while my mind kept drifting back to the cabin kitchen. David Kim, the guy who sat 2 desks over, asked if I wanted to grab lunch. I said yes, mostly to have something normal to do. Over sandwiches, he talked about his kids and the new house he was trying to buy. I listened and laughed at the right places, but I couldn't stop thinking about how easy it was for some people to have families that didn't require this much pretending. That afternoon, I got a text from my cousin Sarah Klein. Sarah was Linda's daughter, a few years younger than me, the one who had always been invited to everything without question. Her message was short and careful. "Hey, heard there was some drama with the old papers. Mom said you're taking some time for yourself. Hope you're okay. See you at the cabin." I stared at it for a long time. She didn't know the full story, or maybe she did, and was choosing the easy side. Either way, the message made it clear that the narrative was already spreading. I forwarded the text to Jessica with no comment. She replied almost immediately, "They're circling the wagons already." "You okay?" I told her I was fine, even though I wasn't. The sarcasm in my own head was loud. Of course they were circling the wagons. The perfect family image couldn't survive if one person started asking why the picture never included everyone equally. Later that week, I had another session with Dr. Elena Vargas. I brought the security footage clip on my phone and played it for her. She listened without interrupting, then asked how it felt to hear it. I said it felt exactly like I had always suspected but never had proof for. She asked what I planned to do next. I told her I didn't know, but that pretending nothing had changed was no longer an option. She nodded and said that clarity often came with consequences and that choosing to see the truth didn't mean the people who built the lie would thank you for it. On Friday, I got another message, this time from my uncle Robert Thompson, Linda's husband. He rarely texted me directly. His message was even more scripted than Sarah's. "Emily, your aunt, and I are concerned about you. Margaret mentioned you found some old things that upset you. Family is important, especially now. Let's talk before the gathering." I didn't reply. The concern felt manufactured, like they had all been given the same talking points. My mother had probably called a family meeting without me and handed out the official version, "Emily is unstable. Best to give her space. Don't engage with the drama." I spent the weekend at home declining an invitation from Jessica to go out because I didn't trust myself not to unload on strangers in a bar. Instead, I sat on the couch and scrolled through old photos on my phone, the ones from previous cabin trips where I was always on the edge of the group shot, smiling like I belonged. The bitterness tasted familiar. I had spent so many years making myself smaller so the myth could stay intact. Now that I had proof it was deliberate, I couldn't go back to shrinking. Monday morning at work, Amanda Torres from the marketing team stopped by my desk. She said I looked tired and asked if everything was okay at home. I gave her the standard answer about family stuff being complicated. She nodded like she understood and offered to cover for me if I needed to leave early. I thanked her and stayed at my desk until the end of the day. The kindness from people who weren't related to me felt sharper than the scripted concern from my relatives. By midweek, the group chat for the family gathering started lighting up with plans. Someone posted a photo of the cabin from last year, everyone smiling on the deck. I wasn't in it. I hadn't been in most of them for years, but seeing it now with the knowledge of the footage made it sting in a new way. My Aunt Linda had posted a message in the chat. Can't wait to see everyone. It's going to be a good weekend. Some of us might not make it this year, but we'll hold space for them. The some of us was clearly aimed at me. No one replied questioning it. The myth was doing its job. I almost texted back. I almost sent the security clip to the entire chat with a simple, "This is why." But I stopped myself. Dr. Vargas had warned me that revenge and truth weren't the same thing. Sending it would feel good for 5 minutes and then make me the villain in their story even more than I already was. I put the phone down and went for a walk instead, the cold air clearing my head just enough to keep me from doing something irreversible. That night I called Jessica again. She asked if I had decided about the gathering. I told her I wasn't going. She said good that I didn't owe them my presence. Then she asked the harder question, what was I going to do long term? Was I going to cut them off completely or just skip this one event? I didn't have an answer. The boundary I had set at the cabin felt solid in the moment, but now it was starting to blur around the edges. Part of me still wanted to believe that if I explained it better, if I showed them the pages and the footage, someone would understand. The sarcastic part of me knew better. They had already chosen the story over the person. The next morning I woke up to a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was the same calm, reasonable tone she had used at the cabin. She said she hoped I was doing better and that she was still open to talking if I wanted to work things out before the gathering. She didn't mention the footage. She didn't apologise. She just left the door cracked like nothing fundamental had changed. I deleted the voicemail without calling back. I went to see Dr. Elena Vargas again that afternoon. I played her the voicemail. She asked what I heard in it. I said I heard someone who still believed she could manage me back into the role I had always played. She asked what I wanted to do about it. I told her I wanted to send the footage to the family chat and let them see it for themselves. She didn't tell me not to. She asked if I was prepared for what might happen after. I said I didn't know, but that staying silent felt like agreeing to disappear again. I left her office and sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. My phone was in my hand. The family group chat was open. The security clip was ready to send. My thumb hovered over the button. If I sent it, there would be no going back. The myth would crack in public. People would take sides. Some would believe me. Most would probably side with my mother because it was easier. Either way, I would be the one who blew it up. I put the phone down without sending. Not yet. But the temptation was there, sharp and insistent. The truth was out in the open between me and my mother. Now it was waiting to see if I would let it spread or keep carrying it alone. I sat in that parking lot for another 10 minutes, thumb still hovering. Then I opened a private message instead of the full group chat. I sent the security clip and 3 pages from the journal to my cousin Mark Thompson and my cousin Sarah Klein. I added one line, "This is what actually happened. I'm not coming to the gathering. I'm done pretending." I didn't send it to my mother or my Aunt Linda. I wanted to see who would actually look at it before the story got rewritten again. Mark replied first 20 minutes later. His text was short. I watched it. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it was this bad. Can we talk?" Sarah never answered. I stared at Mark's message for a long time. It was the first crack in the wall my mother and aunt had built, but it was small and private. He wasn't willing to say anything in the group chat where it would cost him something. That told me everything I needed to know about how far the myth still reached. I drove home and tried to eat something. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Around 9 o'clock, my phone lit up with the family group chat. Someone had posted the usual cabin packing list. Then my Aunt Linda replied to the whole thread, "Looking forward to seeing the ones who can make it. We'll miss the ones who can't, but sometimes space is what people need." The message sat there like it was normal. No one asked what she meant. The myth was still doing its job. An hour later, I got a call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She left another calm, reasonable message asking if we could clear the air before the weekend. She still didn't mention the footage or the journal. She just kept offering to manage me back into place. I deleted it without listening all the way through. The next morning, the group chat had more activity. My uncle, Robert Thompson, posted a photo of the cabin deck at sunset with the caption, "Can't wait for this view with the people who matter most." I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't been in any of them for years. The comment section filled with heart emojis and "see you soon" from cousins I barely spoke to anymore. Tyler Klein. Sarah's brother wrote family first, always. I screenshotted it and sent it to Jessica with the caption, "They're already rewriting the seating chart without me." Jessica called me on her lunch break. She asked if I had sent anything. I told her about the private messages to Mark and Sarah. She was quiet for a second, then said, "At least Mark looked. That's something." I told her it didn't feel like something. It felt like the smallest possible acknowledgement that still let him stay comfortable. She didn't argue. She just said she was proud of me for not setting the whole chat on fire, even though part of me wanted to. That afternoon, I had another session with Dr. Elena Vargas. I showed her Mark's text and the group chat screenshots. She asked how it felt to see the family continue, like nothing had changed. I said it felt exactly like the journal pages had described, deliberate, efficient, and easier for everyone else. She asked what I was going to do with the rest of the footage. I told her I was still deciding. Part of me wanted to send it to everyone and watch the myth crack in real time. The other part knew that once I did, there would be no version of family left for me at all. I left her office and went straight to work. Amanda Torres caught me in the hallway and asked if I wanted to grab coffee after our last meeting. I said yes. We sat in the break room and she talked about her sister who lived across the country and how they only saw each other at holidays. She said family was complicated for everyone. I nodded and didn't tell her my version of complicated, involved security footage and journal pages that proved I had been edited out on purpose. Some truths were too heavy to drop on someone who was just being kind. That night, I sat on the couch with my phone and the family chat open again. The messages had slowed down, but the tone was settled. Everyone had accepted that I wouldn't be there. My mother had posted a single message. "We'll hold space for anyone who needs it." It was the same line she had used for years when she wanted to sound generous while keeping control. I almost laughed. The sarcasm rose up sharp and familiar. She was still writing the story and everyone was still reading along. I didn't send the footage to the group. Instead, I saved it in a folder on my phone labelled "Proof I Didn't Imagine It." Then I opened my contacts and blocked my mother's number, my Aunt Linda's number, and the main family group chat. I didn't block Mark or Sarah. I left those threads open in case either of them ever decided the truth was worth more than comfort. I knew it probably wouldn't happen, but I left the door cracked anyway. That was the last generous thing I did for any of them. The weekend of the gathering came and went. I didn't drive to the cabin. I didn't check the security app. I went to work on Friday, had dinner with Jessica on Saturday, and spent Sunday cleaning my apartment like it was any other weekend. On Monday morning, the group chat had new photos. Everyone looked happy on the deck. My mother had posted one of the whole group with the caption, "Another perfect weekend with the people who show up." I didn't click on it. I already knew what it would show. That evening, I had the breakdown I had been holding off for weeks. It wasn't loud. I was standing at the kitchen sink washing a coffee mug when the weight of it hit all at once. My hands started shaking. I sat down on the floor with the mug still in my hand and cried until my chest hurt and my eyes burned. I wasn't crying because I missed them. I was crying because I finally understood how much of my life I had spent making myself smaller so their story could stay clean. The journal pages, the footage, the careful texts from cousins who had already chosen sides, it all added up to the same thing. I had never been part of the myth. I had only been allowed to stand near it. When the crying stopped, I stayed on the floor for a while, the mug cold in my hands. The apartment was quiet. No one was calling. No one was texting to check if I was okay. The silence was exactly what I had chosen when I set the boundary. It hurt more than I had expected, but it was also clean. There was no more pretending, no more waiting for an invitation that would never come on my terms, no more accepting the version of me that made everyone else comfortable. I got up, rinsed the mug, and put it away. Then I opened my phone and archived the family group chat instead of unblocking it. I didn't delete the messages, I just moved them where I wouldn't see them every day. Dr. Vargas had said that boundaries sometimes meant grieving the family you thought you had, not the one that actually existed. I was starting to understand what she meant. The weeks after that were quiet in a way that felt both empty and necessary. Jessica came over more often. We watched bad movies and she didn't ask about my mother or the cabin. David Kim at work invited me to a team lunch and I went. Amanda Torres started leaving small coffee orders on my desk on rough mornings without saying anything. These were small things, but they were real. They didn't require me to shrink or lie or accept exclusions as normal. Mark texted me once more 2 weeks after the gathering. He said he had thought about what I sent him and that he didn't know how to fix it, but he was sorry. I thanked him and didn't push for more. He had looked at the truth. That was more than most of them had done. It still wasn't enough to bring me back into a story that needed me to disappear. My mother never called again after I blocked her number. My Aunt Linda sent one text through a different number asking if I was really going to let this ruin everything. I didn't answer. The sarcasm in my head was loud and steady. They had already ruined it. I had just stopped agreeing to pretend otherwise. One evening in late fall, I drove up to the mountains by myself, not to the cabin, just to a lookout point I used to visit when I was younger. I sat in the car with the windows cracked and watched the light change over the ridges. I thought about the journal pages and the security footage and the careful way my mother and aunt had edited me out of every picture for years. The truth was ugly, and it was mine. I didn't have the family myth anymore, but I also didn't have to keep lying to myself to stay in it. I still have bad days. Sometimes I see a photo from someone else's family gathering and feel the old sting. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just kept the envelope in the drawer and stayed quiet. Then I remember the footage of my mother and aunt laughing about how easy it was to remove me, and the wondering stops. The boundary I set cost me the version of family I had spent decades trying to earn. It also gave me something I had never had before, the certainty that I didn't have to disappear to keep other people comfortable. I still talk to Jessica and Dr. Elena Vargas. I still have lunch with David Kim and Amanda Torres when they invite me. I still archive messages instead of deleting them because part of me wants to remember exactly why I chose to step out of the frame. The myth my mother built is still going. I'm just not in it anymore. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like the truth I can actually live with. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to choose between the comfortable lie and the painful truth, you know how much that choice can cost. What would you have done with the envelope and the footage? Comment strength if you felt this and tell me in the comments what you would have done.